A biologist and former attorney, Amaroq has worked on wolf issues in the Northern Rockies, Alaska, the Southwest, Pacific West, and at the federal level for 23 years. She was a stakeholder advisor for the drafting of Oregon and California states' wolf plans and currently focuses on wolf management by state wildlife agencies, commissions, and legislatures in Washington, Oregon, and California. Amaroq has previously worked for the Mexican Wolf Conservation Fund, Defenders of Wildlife, and the California Wolf Center. She holds a BS from Iowa State University, an MS from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a JD from the University of California Hastings College of Law. The Center for Biological Diversity is a national nonprofit conservation organization with more than 1.7 million members and online activists dedicated to the protection of endangered species and wild places. And with that, I will turn it over to Amaroq.
Thank you so much, Steph. Thank you, Speak for Wolves, for holding this annual conference. It's one I look forward to every single year. I'm going to share my screen. And is that working for everyone?
That looks great.
Terrific. Okay. Oops. Trying to switch to the next slide, Amanda, and for some reason it's not working. Let's see.
Try your right arrow key.
I guess I'll do that. Okay, thanks. Tech help. What would we do without tech help? The Petaluma Valley was once teeming with vast herds of deer and elk, and groves of valley oak and black oak thick with acorns blanketed the landscape. The Petaluma River winds its way through this valley. It meanders to a mighty bay to the south, which then goes on to the ocean. And the river was a major flyway for ducks and geese in flocks so dense they blackened the sky, sometimes blocking out the sun for an hour at a time. But this river and the surrounding valley also welcomed swarms of migrating brilliant orange and black monarch butterflies. And California condors soared the thermals. There were 10-foot wingspans powerfully arcing over the land 10,000 feet below. And in the midst of all this, on a sloped ridge, or Petaluma, from the Coast Miwok language, coyotes sat down to have a conversation with chicken hawk, and in their conversation, they created the humans who became the Lecatuet Nation, who lived in the Petaluma region for thousands of years until the Spanish arrived. The Spaniards brought with them deadly European diseases which ravaged the Lecatuet people, livestock which forced out the native deer and elk, and invasive plants which replaced the native sedges and bunch grasses. The Lecatuet way of life was destroyed. And these Spanish settlers have long been celebrated and written about in history books, and statues have been erected in their honor. This is where I live, the land of the Petalumans, of the Lecatuet Nation. Recently, just to the south of me, a monument of Father Sarah was toppled. The last known wolf in California was killed in 1924. The last known wolf in Oregon was killed and brought in for a bounty payment in 1947. And in Washington, after 1915 or so, the state's once bountiful wolf population was reduced to occasional sightings of just lone wolves, or at most 2 to 3 wolves together. And across the rest of the country, wolves were similarly exterminated, and most were gone by the early 1930s. It took another 40 plus years to get wolves listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act in 1974. And 20 years after their listing, wolves were restored to Yellowstone and central Idaho. 20 years after that, Wolves made it from Idaho to Oregon and then to California. And all of these accomplishments and upheavals, they all happen because people made it happen. People like the Muries, who studied wolves in Alaska in the early 1900s, and whose published research informed how wolves live and that we need not fear them. People like Canadian biologist Douglas Pinlot, who wrote an article in 1967 proposing that wolves be reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park. Former Secretary of the Interior Bruce Babbitt and former Director of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Molly Beatty, both of whom championed the reintroduction of wolves to the Northern Rockies. People like Renee Askins, who established the Wolf Fund to publicize wolf recovery and popularize it and bring wolf education to the public. People like the wolf capture and reintroduction team of Mike Phillips, Doug Smith, Carter Niemeyer, Dave Meach, Ed Bangs, Mark Johnson, and many others. Of course, the multiple conservation organizations who filed lawsuits and who joined lawsuits together to keep that momentum going and to see the process through to the end. And the members and supporters of these conservation organizations, people like you, who contacted your congressional representatives, agency policymakers to show your overwhelming support for wolf recovery. All of these people made it happen. This is history. These are stories that are thrilling and exciting and often tragic, but they make the heart race. They give you the confidence and the energy to fight for the future. Because after all, we are here to create future stories that will be celebrated at future conferences. The West Coast, from Southeast Alaska to California, has been the field of many of these battles and many successes. The Alexander Archipelago wolf. It's a rare subspecies of gray wolf, Canis lupus lyconi. And this wolf subspecies is found on the southeastern Alaskan mainland, but also on some of the islands of the Alexander Archipelago, which is this network of more than 1,000 islands off of the mainland. This region is also home to the Tongass National Forest, which is the largest designated national forest in North America, with some of the largest remaining stands of old-growth temperate rainforest in the world. It consists of 17 million acres, and within it there are 19 designated wilderness areas. 80% of the Alexander Archipelago's wolf's habitat is within the boundaries of the Tongass National Forest. Their habitat is within all of the areas shown as green on this map. And Prince of Wales Island, which is in that outlined box towards the bottom, this island supports a substantial population portion of the wolf's entire population. This region of southeast coastal Alaska also is the ancestral home of First Nations people and has been for thousands of years for the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian. Alexander Archipelago wolves are exquisitely beautiful, don't you think? They're noticeably smaller than the typical gray wolf. On average, they weigh only about 30 to 50 pounds. They also have a denser and darker coat. It's typically black or very dark gray. And these wolves require dense, undeveloped forest with an abundance of wildlife for food sources. Old-growth forest is also critical to providing appropriate denning sites because these wolves make their dens in the roots of old-growth trees. They eat a variety of other wildlife critters, but primarily they rely on Sitka black-tailed deer for their main prey. And a very significant threat to the wolf's continued existence may be the lack of a sustainable food source because the deer themselves are in decline thanks to the large-scale clear-cutting of old-growth forests here. In Southeast Alaska and on the mainland and on Prince of Wales Island and the other nearby islands, these wolves are unique because they are significantly different from other gray wolves, smaller size, darker in color. They have a unique diet component because they eat lots of salmon in the fall, and they are genetically distinct. They also occupy a unique ecological habitat, the coastal rainforest. What has happened here with these wolves is a typical pattern. It happens of the forces of the logging industry, corporate interests, the hunting industry, politicians, plus the indifference, the failure, the complicity, and the corruption of the state and federal wildlife agencies in the region. On Prince of Wales Island in 1994, the wolf population was 336. 20 years later, it had declined to only 89 animals. By 2016, it was back up to 231, but then it began a decline again in 2018. It had dropped to 170. And the reason that the population increased between 2014 and 2016 was due to the very low numbers in 2014. A wolf habitat management program was jointly created by the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. And this wolf habitat management program contained elements that were designed to conserve the wolves here. And one key element ensured that quotas would remain in place, so that even though wolf hunting and trapping was allowed, the quotas had to be set sufficiently low to ensure the continued existence of a sustainable wolf population. In addition to this joint management plan, the federal management plan for the Tongass National Forest also directs the U.S. Forest Service to assist in managing legal and illegal wolf mortality rates to within sustainable levels. Nevertheless, in the 2019-2020 trapping season, which just took place from last November to mid-January of this year, 165 of the 170 wolves estimated to be living on Prince of Wales Island were killed through trapping, because this joint wolf habitat program and the directives in the Tongass National Forest Plan were completely ignored. Let me say that again. 165 of the estimated 170 wolves on this island were killed. The state of Alaska removed all quotas for this island and stopped any monitoring during the trapping season to keep track of how many wolves were being killed, and the U.S. Forest Service did nothing to intervene. Going back at least 20 years, there have been massive battles by environmental groups and First Nations to protect the old-growth forests here, to protect the wolves, but also to maintain other federal laws that protect this special place from constant assaults. For example, there have been efforts by past administrations to remove the Tongass National Forest from the protections of the roadless rule. Fortunately, there have been victorious court battles to stop those efforts. The roadless rule is a landmark conservation rule that was adopted by Congress in 2001 to protect nearly 60 million acres of wild national forests and grasslands from new road building and logging, which of course decimates habitat for wolves and deer. There also have been administrative petitions and legal challenges filed in an attempt to get the Alexander Archipelago wolf listed for protection under the Federal Endangered Species Act in 2011 and in 2015. But of course, under the Trump administration, there have been ongoing efforts to eliminate any and all protections here. In 2019, October last year, the Trump administration worsened this threat with a proposed plan that it issued that month to eliminate long-standing roadless protections on 9 million of the 17 million acres of the Tongass National Forest. Now, this map shows you where logging has already taken place and where additional logging would occur if the Trump administration goes forward with its plan. So on this map, those areas that are in black is where there has been logging on the Tongass National Forest, and you can see how well the roadless rule has protected this incredible forest. In the areas that are the yellow cross-hatched, these are all the proposed new logging sites. And you can see, especially there on Prince of Wales Island, how much wolf and deer habitat that would decimate, but even through nearly half of the Tongass National Forest. So last month, the Center for Biological Diversity, the Alaska Rainforest Defenders, and Defenders of Wildlife petitioned the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to give Endangered Species Act protections to the Alexander Archipelago wolf. We are asking them to protect Alexander Archipelago wolves in Southeast Alaska as a distinct population segment of this subspecies. We hope that this will be a future story of success. Now, moving down the coast to Washington, Oregon, and California. Like the rest of the country, the last wolves in these coastal states were largely exterminated by the 1930s. Today, there are between 108 and 145 estimated wolves in Washington, in Oregon, 158, and in California, a known 14 wolves. How did we get here? Wolves started to return to the West Coast in the early 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s, and three key factors made this possible. First, the reintroduction of wolves to central Idaho and Yellowstone National Park in 95 and 96 resulted in packs establishing there, and a few generations later, some of Idaho's wolves headed west to Oregon and Washington. A decade after that, Oregon's wolves began to disperse into California. Second, in all three West Coast states, wolves were federally protected, so any wolves dispersing there were automatically protected. And third, wolves coming into Oregon and Washington were already also protected by those states' State Endangered Species Act. And after wolves came into California, the Center and allies got wolves protected under California's State Endangered Species Act as well. Each of these three states has begun to develop a wolf population, though wolf recovery is far from sufficient at this time. But in 2011, Congress stripped wolves of federal protections in the eastern one-third of Washington and the eastern one-third of Oregon. In 2015, Oregon stripped wolves of its State Endangered Species Act protections, and Washington's state law is also in place, but it's very weak on protections, which means that in both eastern Oregon and eastern Washington, the state wildlife agencies can and do kill wolves for conflicts with livestock. Let's start with Washington, which is a stunningly beautiful state of mountains and rivers and valleys. It's filled with hikers and skiers and wildlife viewers. And in Washington, close to 70% of the population strongly supports the return of wolves. The state's wildlife agency, however, conducts its business as if 70% of the population wanted wolves killed and exterminated. Washington's first wolf pack was confirmed in 2008, and in 2011, the state adopted a wolf conservation and management plan. But then the state wildlife agency took wolf management away from its endangered species staff and turned it over to its game management staff. Right after that, wolves lost federal protections in eastern Washington. And since then, the state has been ignoring key science, key principles in the state wolf plan. It has been killing wolves and wiping out entire packs. In fact, since 2012, the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife has killed 32 state endangered wolves on behalf of private for-profit livestock operators. 90% of the wolves killed were killed for conflicts on public lands, and 84% of the wolves killed were killed for the same ranching operation, which refuses to adequately watch over its cattle. Most of the killing has occurred in northeastern Washington, in the northeastern corner of the state, where, as you can see from this map, is where most of Washington's wolves live. There are a number of problems with wolf management in Washington. I'm going to touch on just a few of them. In essence, wolf management in Washington is repeatedly a losing proposition for the wolves because the state agency places a higher value on the desires of the livestock industry than the interests and needs of the wolves, even though wolves are designated as state endangered and even though they are still in the early stages of recovery in Washington. To implement its state wolf plan, the agency created a wolf advisory group, known for short as WAG. The WAG is composed of private citizens, but the WAG is heavily weighted with ranching and hunting interests. And just last week, the agency removed from the WAG Tim Coleman, who was the best representative of the vast majority of people who live in Washington who want to see wolves protected. They kicked him off the WAG because he dissented. This is the epitome of dishonesty and corruption by the government. Washington also has no rules requiring livestock operators in wolf country to use proactive measures to deter conflicts with wolves, and the state wildlife agency won't require them to either. For the past 4 years, the state agency has relied on the WAG to craft a protocol of how to address livestock wolf conflicts, but the protocol contains no actual requirements of the agency or of livestock operators. It also isn't enforceable, so the agency is free to do whatever it wants, and it does. There are innumerable examples, but the most egregious is that of the 32 wolves the agency has killed, 27 were killed for one particular livestock operation which simply refuses to take adequate steps to protect its livestock and can't even find dead or injured livestock until days after conflicts occurred because the operation doesn't keep track of where its livestock are. Here we have this magnificent state with overwhelming public support for wolves, yet the whole field of wolf management here is a mess. We have filed lawsuits, we have filed administrative petitions to get enforceable rules in place. The governor has even weighed in. Last fall, Governor Inslee wrote the agency to say that the annual killing of wolves in Northeast Washington is simply unacceptable. And he told the agency it must come up with new solutions. Irrespective, the state agency has been defiant of Governor Inslee's directive, and instead it continues with its old methods. We believe some key solutions lie in these three actions. Wolf management in Washington, especially how the state addresses livestock wolf conflicts, must go through a public rulemaking process, which would create transparent rules which are enforceable, which require livestock operators and the agency staff to use non-lethal measures. And a rulemaking process would also mean that whatever management options are arrived at would have to go through a full scientific assessment. Secondly, the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission, which oversees the state agency, must be reformed so that people holding those seats have the science background necessary to be making decisions about fish and wildlife in the state. That means filling current vacancies on the commission that are coming due very soon and replacing existing members as their terms come up. If you listened to Quinn Reed's discussion yesterday about reform of commissions, and she gave some examples from Oregon, we have the same problems in Washington and the same problems nationwide with these state level commissions. Finally, we need a total reform of the commission, the agency, and the funding source for the agency in order to stop the ability of political influence to shape their decisions, such as the influence that is placed on them by sports hunting and the livestock industries, the fisheries industries. This model must be changed dramatically. So Washington is a mess, but I can tell you, the desire, the energy, and the passion of the groups that are fighting back is inexhaustible. Let's move on to Oregon. Like Washington, Oregon's first wolf pack was confirmed in 2008, and Oregon also crafted a state wolf conservation and management plan. They adopted their plan quite early in 2005, even before its first pack was confirmed. Go through just a few basic Oregon wolf conservation facts. In the beginning of wolf management in Oregon, the state wildlife agency was ignoring its state wolf plan and rushing to kill wolves too quickly. So the center and allies sued the state, and the result was much stronger protections and enforceable requirements of the state agency and livestock operators to use non-lethal measures before wolves could be killed. The agency has increased its emphasis on non-lethal measures, and it has hired more staff to teach those methods to livestock operators. It seems to be paying off. Last year, even though Oregon's wolf population grew by 15%, conflicts with livestock went down by 43%, and the agency did not kill any wolves. As far as recovery, well, lest you think that 15% annual population growth means that Oregon has lots of wolves or that the wolf population here is recovered, here's a really important fact to consider. Scientists who've done modeling studies of suitable wolf habitat in Oregon conclude that Oregon could support up to 1,420 wolves. That means wolf recovery in Oregon is still in its early stages. With an estimated current population of 158 wolves, that's only a little more than 10% of what the state could support. Greater numbers are also necessary to maintain genetic diversity and to restore wolves to their ecological functions. And where wolves are living tells the other part of that story. This map shows where Oregon's wolf packs currently reside, but there's close to 10 times the amount of suitable habitat that wolves are not occupying yet. On the good news end of things, though most of Oregon's packs are in the northwest portion of the state, there finally are 3 known wolf packs on the west side. The Rogue Pack down here in the southwestern part of the state, the Indigo Pack to the north in Douglas and Lane counties, and then up here, the White River Pack, partially in Wasco County and the Warm Springs Indian Reservation. There are still some concerns in Oregon. It's important to monitor what's happening with the continued use of non-lethal measures. But the main concern conservation groups have is that state wolf plan revisions that were made in 2019 opened the door to wolf hunting and trapping. So we're keeping a very close eye on that, all of us involved in Oregon wolf conservation and recovery. And if something comes up where your voice is needed, testifying, calling, sending emails, you will certainly be told. So let's turn our attention to the last subject of this talk, California and its wolves. As many of you know, an Oregon-born wolf called OR7 was the first known wolf to enter California in nearly 90 years. Born in 2009, he left his birthplace in Northeast Oregon as a young adult in the fall of 2011. He crossed the state of Oregon, and then he kept on going into California. And his timing was impeccable. He crossed into California on December 28th of 2011, 38 years to the day that the Endangered Species Act was passed. OR7 eventually returned to Southwest Oregon, where he met a mate, formed the Rogue Pack, and sired pups 5 years in a row from 2014 through 2018. Several other Oregon wolves have come to California, including at least 3 of OR7's pups. This spring, the Oregon Wildlife Agency announced that OR7 had likely died. He's not been seen with his pack since last October, and he would have turned 11 this spring, which is ancient for a wolf. He lived a long, celebrated life, and he left an indelible legacy for wolf recovery in the Pacific West in both Oregon and California. California, like Oregon and Washington, also developed a state wolf plan, and modeling studies were done to identify suitable wolf habitat in California. This map shows in all of that dark gray area all the great wolf habitat that's been identified. It's around 26,000 square miles. And the really fun thing is that wolves that have dispersed into California and spent any time in the state have ground truthed this map. Many have traveled in some of the exact same places shown on this map. Two confirmed wolf packs have been established in California. And the first was the Shasta Pack. The existence of this all-black 7-member wolf family was confirmed in late summer of 2015 in Siskiyou County in northeastern California. But the pack mysteriously disappeared a few months later after being implicated in livestock conflicts. California's second and only currently existing pack is the Lassen Pack, which ranges across Lassen and Plumas counties, about a 500 square mile territory in this area in yellow shown on the map here. Confirmed in 2017, the pack's original breeding male was a son of OR7. He was born into OR7's first litter in 2014, and he came to California a few years later. The breeding female of the Lassen Pack, on the other hand, traveled to California from the Northern Rockies. The two met up in California. They had pups together 3 years in a row in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Other wolves have come to California. Not counting the Lassen Pack's new pups this year, I know of 29 different wolves who since 2011 came into California and stayed, or came into California and left, or came into California and disappeared, or came into California and were illegally killed. One who came to California and stayed is OR54, pictured here. And she is a daughter of OR7. She was born into his 2016 litter. And she came into California in January of 2018. And she stayed for 2 years. She ranged widely in search of a mate. She covered 9 northeastern California counties. She covered nearly 9,000 miles. She made a few trips home to Oregon, to her pack in Southwest Oregon, to check in with the road pack. She even made a trip all the way up to Bend and then back into California. She made a trip as far south as almost Lake Tahoe and dipped into Nevada briefly. Tragically, in February of this year, she was found dead, but the cause has not yet been revealed by agency officials. Today, there are 14 known wolves in California, and that is the Lassen Pack, which now consists of 2 adults, 4 subadults or teens from prior year's litters, and 8 new pups born this year. The pack's original breeding male disappeared last year in June of 2019, a few months after that year's litter was born. But a new male, a black wolf of unknown origin, a man of mystery, if you will, began to be seen hanging out with the remainder of the pack. This year, in 2020, that black male has been confirmed through genetic analysis of scats collected from him and the pups to be the Lassen Pack's new breeding male. And he and the breeding female had their first litter together this year, producing 8 bouncing, adorable pups. Obviously, wolves are extremely new in California. There's only a few here at present, but California has the most protective laws in the country. It has the highest level of support for wolf recovery, and it has the best political landscape for wolves. While I can't possibly match the breathtaking videos Tommy Knowles showed here yesterday of the Echo Creek Pack, here is a short trail cam video clip of California's newest wolf residents, the Lassen pups. It will melt your heart a little bit. This was taken in July this year. So these pups are about 3 months old in this video. A swarm of California wolf puppies, yay! Before we go into question and answer, I'm anticipating that many of you are going to want to know who you can write to or call or what action alerts that we have up right now for protecting these wolves on our website. So I'm going to show 2 slides here, which our hosts are also going to put into the chat, this information, which gives you this information. And so this first one, to see our active action alerts, you'd go to our website, biologicaldiversity.org/action/alerts/. Once you get there, click on, at the top of the screen, wildlife. You'll get a drop-down box and you will see a whole slew of wildlife alerts. You'll see we have at least 3 different alerts up there right now regarding Washington wolves. And we also have an alert to protect these rare Alaska wolves from trapping. And then specifically, for Washington again. This is some contact information for you to be able to write to Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Director Kelly Suswind and the Washington Fish and Wildlife Commission, and to call Governor Jay Inslee to express your outrage over the ongoing wolf slaughter and to demand that public rulemaking commence that involves the public and scientific analysis to get some enforceable rules in place. And so that is the end of my presentation today. And I think we're going to go into question and answer in a moment. I did want to share with you 3 books that have come out this past year. Steph, I don't know if you need to open up Q&A first or if I should wave those books in front of the camera now first.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I mention these books in part because a lot of times people ask me about wolf book suggestions, and there's kind of a range of several new books that have come out just in the last year. So this one is actually written by Sean McGuire, who was a speaker at Speak for Wolves a few years ago when this conference was held in West Yellowstone. And Sean has lived in Alaska for 30 years. The book is self-published through Cloudberry Lookout Press. The book is called Two Toes and the Magic Pack. This is a novel, and it is about a unique pack of wolves that has somehow managed to stealthily keep itself from harm from the aerial gunning that takes place in parts of Alaska. So this is a big one. And then because Tommy yesterday spoke about the wolf calls, the tragic, absolutely senseless wolf calls that are happening in British Columbia, I want to mention this book. This is Spur, A Wolf Story. This is a children's book. I would say, although it's aimed at younger children, if you are a parent, I would read the book first. It does have tragedy in it, but it's a beautifully written book that helps children understand that our wolves are at risk and that we all need to grow up wanting to protect them, and has beautiful illustrations. And this is from Greystone Books. And then third, this new book is just being released on the 19th of this month, although I think it's available for pre-order now. This is called Wolf Time. It is by Barbara J. Morich, who used to work for the National Park Service and a number of the national parks in California. She now lives in Idaho. This is a magical novel about wolves returning to California that involves heroes and villains and breathtaking beauty and unbearable tragedy and interspecies communication. So that's another third one that's just coming out this week. So with that, I am ready to answer your questions. Thank you.